where have you been? Are you secretly running Justin Baldoni's alleged content farm?
Oh, I wish. I mean, think of what the money I could make. But no, I have been on a farm, just a different type. So think more sheep and less computers. And God, I mean, imagine actually getting paid to scroll the internet instead of doom scrolling for free.
I know, right? Anyway, this is Straight to the Comments, the podcast where we go beyond the headlines and ask what the reactions really tell us about the culture we're living in.
And we couldn't think of a bigger story to return with than Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni.
Blake Lively says she was the victim of sexual harassment during the filming of It Ends With Us, and that when she spoke up, Justin Baldoni's team retaliated and launched a smear campaign to destroy her reputation. Then Justin fired back with his own lawsuit, insisting she's weaponized fake victimhood and tried to bully him out of his own production.
The ensuing lawsuits have triggered just a wave of dedicated media content, with thousands of voices weighing in online. To some, Blake is the face of Me Too, but to others, she's Amber Heard 2.0.
So this isn't just a lawsuit, it's reputations and careers being on the line. It's a fight to control the story. And the comments, well, they have become weapons in themselves.
And we're left asking, can we believe anything we read online anymore? Has Me Too empathy fatigue finally set in? And how can we differentiate who the real victim is when everyone's just pointing fingers?
Let's go straight to the comments. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. It's been a while. In fact, a whole year. I just can't believe it, Sara.
No, me neither. And to be honest, it has felt like possibly one of the longest years ever for us. But as everyone knows, the comments have never stopped.
No.
And I've seen so many stories that I would have loved for us to do a deep dive into. But, you know, life gets in the way, and we've finally reached a point in both of our lives where we can get back to the podcast. Yay. So,
Yay.
yeah.
And I've really, really missed it. I said to you, and it's no joke, I've had to upgrade my phone or my iCloud storage of the number of screenshots, things I'm sort of taking pictures of and talking about with you. And I think we can really put them in season 4, which we've got now. Season 4. This is the start of season 4. So thank you for joining us. But for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm aware, Sara, we never really introduce ourselves. We're just a bit anonymous. But we're real people. We're not AI. I'm Lisa Williams, a former entertainment publicist, now a communications consultant based in Norway.
And I'm Sara Illingworth, and I've got a background in psychology and writing. And I'm currently living on a little rural property in Western Australia. So think sheep and kangaroos.
It is strange we sat back here in the podcast chair, isn't it?
It's weird. It did take me a little while to remember how to do it all. I'm really glad that we have been able to get back to this. You know, we've had a lot going on in both of our lives.
Yeah.
And we've even survived our own little legal drama with the Daily Mail. I don't know if people followed this at home, but we had the good news of winning the trademark for Straight to the Comments for our show as a podcast. And this was after the Mail Online had decided to start their own podcast with pretty much the same name. They just added an exclamation mark. So, yeah, I mean, that was a stressful time for both of us.
It was. And you know what made it worse is someone wrote to me and said, oh, my God, you've been reviewed in The Guardian and you had a great review. And you're like, no, they're definitely 2 young guys on the cover of that podcast.
Yeah,
and
not us.
It's not us. We're not interviewing Katie Price. You did a great job, by the way, sorting out the trademark. It was a lot of work. And thank you everyone at home who supported us as well. It's not quite as big a legal drama as the one we're getting into today, which is about Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. There is so much content out there about this story. We're really going to try and stick to the essentials and focus on the comments and the reactions themselves. And what we're trying to do is piece them together and sort of look at it and go, what does this say about society and the media right now?
This is actually going to be a double bill. So we've started big. And in today's episode, we're getting into the case, the reactions. We're going to be talking about the rage bait economy, astroturfing. Don't worry. We'll explain what that is if you don't know. And the culture wars going on through this case. And then tomorrow, so not too long to wait, will be part 2. And we'll step back and we're going to look at the bigger picture. So we're going to be looking at content creators all the way to free speech. And if, in fact, the outcomes of this case could actually filter down into our lives.
Did you actually see the film It Ends With Us?
I didn't. And by the time it came out, I really didn't want to, just because of all of the furore.
Yeah, same here. I kind of tuned out. I felt like there was these endless clips of Blake and this weird tension she was having with Justin. But it did feel like there was suddenly this huge wave of negative Blake content, which honestly I'd never really seen before.
I'd seen a little bit back in the day, more about the wedding on a plantation and rumours that potentially her and Ryan had started as an affair on set. But I would say it was the same level of gossip pretty much every A-list celeb gets. And other than that, she was still a bit of a golden girl and she seemed pretty popular.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I always felt like she was getting really good coverage, especially at the Met Gala. Like she was the real Met Gala queen. But as many of you probably know, this film was based on a huge best-selling book by Colleen Hoover, and Blake Lively was the main star. And Justin Baldoni, who I didn't really know about before all of this, was actually acting, directing and producing through his own company, Wayfarer Studios. And I think it's important to note, he actually holds the rights to some of her best-selling books. So this really is his project.
Yeah, it really is. And I actually did know a little bit about Justin. So he was in Jane the Virgin, which I watched and enjoyed. And he also very much talks about being a male feminist and an ally of women. So I did watch his TED Talk called Why I'm Done Trying to Be Man Enough. And in that, he challenges traditional masculinity and he asks whether men could be strong enough to be sensitive. And I've got to be honest, I thought it was pretty good. I agreed with the sentiment. It was actually covering a lot of the same ground of what Brené Brown already talks about in terms of shame and vulnerability. But it was more focused towards men and trying to get them to take this on board. And when you watch something like that, it's always hard to know if something is purely performative or if they actually walk their talk in real life. So I definitely can't comment on that.
He just comes across as very sincere and earnest, which is what I think made this promo campaign seem a bit disjointed. You know, Blake was over there promoting it almost like a girls' night out. She was telling people to wear your florals, buy her Betty booze, cocktails, go see the film. And then there was Justin leaning hard into the domestic violence themes of the film.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a mismatch. She was out there selling Prosecco and he was trying to sell gravitas.
Oh my God, yeah. And you know what? The internet really did pick up on that contrast. You started seeing these viral hate edits of her, I call them. One that really blew up was a resurfaced interview from 2016 with a Norwegian reporter, Kjersti Flo. She even titled it on YouTube, The Blake Lively Interview That Made Me Want to Quit My Job.
I did actually see that and it was a bit odd, to be honest. It was uncomfortable viewing.
It was a bit odd. And for anyone who's not seen it, the reporter opens with, "Congrats on your little bump." Blake was visibly pregnant at the time. And then Blake shoots back, "Congrats on your little bump." Except the reporter wasn't pregnant. And it was later revealed that she's actually struggling with her own fertility issues. And I think the thing is, when this clip resurfaced, comments did range from, "I can't believe how rude Blake is," to, "Hang on. Asking about pregnancy is rude. She was just setting a boundary." But here's the thing. Once that hate train started, everything got repackaged as proof that she's always been awful.
But you know, despite all of that, I'm right in understanding that the film actually did pretty well, right?
Oh, it did. It did incredibly well. It was only made for $25 million and it ended up making $350 million. Ooh. So it was a huge success. So I think it was a bit of a shock when last December, in fact on December the 19th, Blake filed a complaint accusing Justin of sexual harassment and running what she called a digital smear campaign. And according to her allegation, Justin crossed boundaries on set, improvising intimate scenes, making sexual remarks, even talking about pornography. She says she reported her concerns, changes were promised, but instead of fixing the problem, he hired a crisis communications team to retaliate. Allegedly, they were paid to plant all this hateful content about her before she could go public.
Let's just rewind. What evidence does she actually have, though? Because these are big claims, right?
Yeah, she has receipts for the smear campaign. And through a subpoena, she actually obtained text messages between Justin's PR crisis managers that she says prove there was an orchestrated campaign against her. In fact, the New York Times, just 2 days after her complaint, published a huge investigation based on her evidence called "We Can Bury Anyone Inside a Hollywood Smear Machine." And central to this was showing the text from the PRs bragging that they could flip the internet mood against Blake within hours.
Well, I think at this point, you know, it's starting to dawn on people, oh, okay, now I know why there have been so many negative stories, because it had seemed like a barrage. And people jumped onto Reddit saying, oh, I read the New York Times article. Those text messages between the PR pros are so fucking gross. And another said, it's absolutely sickening to read how happy they are to be manipulating the public's opinion in order to cover themselves for harassment.
Yeah, and you know what? They are unsettling to read. I'm just going to read some of them out between the two female publicists. This is the first one. He wants to feel, that's Justin Baldoni, he wants to feel like she can be buried. Next, narrative is crazy good. The majority of socials are so pro-Justin, and I don't even agree with half of them. And the last one, and socials are really, really ramping up in his favour. She must be furious. It's actually sad because it just shows you how much people really want to hate on women.
It is sad though, isn't it? I mean, these are female publicists and on one hand, I'm like, why should they be held to a higher standard than the male ones? And it is just their job. But really, this is the kind of attitudes that you want to be encouraging in the world as women. It does bother me.
I think it bothered a lot of people at the time. For Justin, the fallout from this was brutal. He was dropped by his talent agency, which, by the way, is the same agency that represents Blake and her husband, Ryan Reynolds. He lost jobs, even had awards rescinded, and overnight he just looked like another Hollywood creep that'd been exposed.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really follow the story a lot because, it was very overreported. But I did actually read the highlights of the sexual harassment that she'd listed in her lawsuit. And when I read them, I was like, Jesus, yeah, of course she's upset if he did these things. And I will say that my tendency is to believe women. I do. But then everything flipped around because Justin then hit back with his own lawsuit.
Oh, he did. And he actually did it on New Year's Eve. He filed a $400 million countersuit against Blake, Ryan Reynolds and her publicist, accusing them of defamation, extortion and sabotaging his role as director. He also sued the New York Times for $250 million, claiming their article was part of a coordinated effort with Blake to destroy his career.
So basically his response was just to sue everyone.
Yeah, pretty much. And his argument was, not only did he not harass her, but she twisted their conversations out of context. He says she was the one bullying him, pushing him out of his own film, banning him from the premiere, and weaponizing false allegations. And look, his lawyer, Brian Friedman, even claimed her complaint wasn't really about harassment at all, but about repairing her own negative image.
Well, I think at this point, people were just really confused and they didn't know who to believe at all. It was just all over the shop.
Really confusing. And then his team really went on the offense. They launched a website of so-called evidence and leaked a 10-minute clip from rehearsals from the film to TMZ and the Mail Online. Blake had described this scene as one of the most uncomfortable moments in her complaint, but unedited, it did look like to many just like two actors that were rehearsing. And remember, this was the scene where he was sort of meant to be acting out of line, like kissing her, saying she smelt so good. I mean, did you actually see it?
I did. And look, I didn't do a forensic analysis of it or anything like some people did. It did just look like acting a scene. Maybe there was some improv. And I don't know, because she didn't look super uncomfortable, but she is an actress, so she could be hiding it. So it's very hard. It didn't seem like a massive smoking gun.
No, and I think that's the part that's really hard, isn't it? This is not like being in a corporate job. This is them acting a scene together. It's their job, right?
Yeah, and I think what I noticed was that suddenly people started to bring up a whole different explanation for what was going on. People were sort of essentially saying that maybe she'd caught feelings in the moment and then lashed out when he didn't reciprocate. So one viral comment said, she couldn't handle that Mr. Tall, Dark and Handsome wasn't fawning all over her.
I saw a lot of comments like that. And I do think it's important to consider the power dynamics at play here. You know, Blake's the huge star. She can get any film probably greenlit. But Justin had something she didn't, the rights. He, like I said earlier, co-founded Wayfarer Studios with a billionaire backer and secured the rights to It Ends With Us, plus the sequel, It Starts With Us. So suddenly he wasn't just an actor, he's the gatekeeper of a potentially massive franchise.
Oh, definitely. And I think that's where you see the comments picking up on this dynamic, because the narrative has now shifted to, well, Blake and Ryan are the Hollywood bullies and they're just trying to oust him from being in control of the franchise that they want.
Oh, absolutely. And you saw so many comments like this. You know, she and Reynolds want the Colleen Hoover empire, and this lawsuit is just their way in.
It does seem like an extreme way to take over the film and get rights for the sequel. I mean, how would that even work? And surely there are so many more film franchises that they could just do. They have the connections and the access, so...
I know, but then here's the thing, you know, Justin's team, they go even further. They start releasing all these text messages, including one where Ryan Reynolds appears to praise Justin, but later Justin alleged that Ryan and Taylor Swift pressured him into accepting Blake's rewrites of key scenes.
So now we've actually got Taylor Swift involved, basically.
I know, right? Just to be clear, she's not a defendant in the case. Justin claims he was invited to Blake's penthouse where Ryan and Taylor were waiting. He said the vibe was basically, wasn't Blake's rewrite brilliant? Don't you think she has such a great mind? He says he felt cornered by these A-listers. Now, Taylor wants nothing to do with this, and Ryan's been trying really hard to get himself dismissed from this case, arguing that even if he did call Justin Baldoni a predator, it was his opinion, not defamation. But online, the narrative had changed. You know, suddenly this looked like David versus Goliath, with Blake and Ryan cast as the bullies, and that shift was really brutal for her image online. And here's where you get the rage economy kicking in. We saw distinct groups forming online. You're either Team Blake or Team Justin. Each side had their own receipts, from YouTube legal deep dives to Reddit threads tearing absolutely everything apart.
And then, of course, as expected, you always have the body language experts, and they're decoding every single little detail to the nth degree. And those clips would actually go viral, get picked up by the tabloids, and the whole cycle started again. I even saw someone do a psychic reading of who would win this lawsuit.
Oh my God.
I know.
And actually, someone who's really built a platform off this is the Norwegian reporter that I mentioned earlier, Flo. And on a Norwegian Reddit thread, people were pointing out she now seems to focus entirely on Blake takedown videos. We found comments like these. I literally counted today how many she's done. 81 YouTube videos. And let me just note, this was 5 months ago. Oh. Another comment, if this was my career, being a YouTube influencer and a hate machine, I would be so embarrassed.
That is really bizarre, but I guess she's cashing in while she can.
Exactly. And you see a lot of people doing this. One Reddit thread summed it up perfectly. This isn't about truth, it's about traffic. The angrier people are, the more money creators make. Then this comment under a YouTube live said, don't care if Blake lied or not, this live stream is gold, keep it messy.
So this case hasn't just been a legal story, it's actually been a new revenue stream for hundreds of influencers, journalists, and even politicians. And all they want is to keep you living in the conflict. We've definitely talked about taking sides before in some of our other episodes, and I'm thinking particularly of the one, The Right Kind of Wronged Woman. And in that one, we were looking at how aggressively invested people were in the Alice Evans and Joan Grufford divorce, and I imagine still are.
They even made a post on Tattle Life getting angry at us because they said that we were defending Alice by not being critical enough of her.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was intense, wasn't it? Because I remember you were quite stressed. I texted you and said, oh my God, we're kind of mini trending on Tattle Life. And you were like, no.
I was trying to fly back from South Africa to England at the time, and I was just like, I can't do what now?
No, don't look. Don't look.
Yeah.
Why do so many people not just take sides, but really get stuck into defending their team's take on a topic?
Here's the thing. Psychologically, humans just are wired to take sides and form groups. And it's because group identity is so important. It gives us a sense of belonging and self-esteem and even a shared purpose. I mean, it's just safer to stand in a crowd than to sit alone in the messy middle.
Yeah, that messy middle can be really uncomfortable. Kind of like inconvenient facts, right?
Yeah, but psychologists, they call it cognitive dissonance. And that's really just the discomfort of when you have to hold two very contradictory ideas all at once. It's so mentally stressful. And so what do we do in that situation? Well, we often just opt for comfort. We ignore the evidence that doesn't fit and we double down on what matches our own chosen view.
Yeah, and I guess that's why some people, once they've chosen a side or a political point of view, no matter what happens, it's all about loyalty, not the facts.
Oh, totally. I think this Cora comment sums it up, where it said, if there's a payoff for us to take a side, for example, money, respect, inclusion, love, friendship, peace of mind, enjoyment, we'll definitely let the payoff, not the truth, determine which side we will pick.
You do see this all the time on social media. You just only have to go on Reddit when you see these sort of pro-Blake and pro-Justin forums. You know, if you go over to one of the forums and you say or question anything to do with Blake, you'll get thrown off, even banned by the moderators quite quickly. They'll then hop over to the pro-Justin groups and say, look, this is proof of their bias.
I think there's also this sense of moral superiority when we feel like we're choosing what we believe is the right side. And that's then just reinforced by encouragement from the rest of the group. So in Emotional Intelligence magazine, they were saying, taking a side often involves pride and a desire to be right, which can lead to hostility towards those who hold a different opinion.
And we know that social media absolutely supercharges this. Like I've said before, rage bait spreads so much faster than nuance.
Oh, and it can be so addictive because it's designed specifically to work on our deeply wired emotional triggers and then give us this massive, quick dopamine hit. Dr. Michu, who's a senior lecturer in digital media at the University of Sydney, says there's a very short feedback loop where people look at something, they get the immediate information and payoff by having seen that something. And we're primed for this kind of content. So, for example, one of my guilty pleasures are those Am I the Asshole stories that have been turned into reels on Facebook. And it's just so easy to get caught up in people's outrageous behavior, you know, like Bridezillas.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing with Blake. She does become this lightning rod for all this rage bait. She's cast as the next Amber Heard. She fits into that sort of classic queen bee archetype, you know, blonde, successful, wealthy, almost too perfect.
And people just went straight there online. So one Reddit thread was literally titled, Blake Lively is a mean girl. And the top comment said she's very dishonest, very rich, very out of touch, just a mean girl through and through. And I definitely feel like every teen movie has that mean girl character, you know, the popular princess type. We love to hate them. And then they ultimately, at the end of the movie, they get the comeuppance that they deserve. And I think the reason that that is so rewarding is because we don't get to see that in real life. People just move on and there's often not that tangible punishment.
I know what you mean. And look, nothing says mean girl more than that infamous text to Justin where Blake wrote, if you ever get round to watching Game of Thrones, you'll appreciate that I'm Khaleesi. And like her, I happen to have a few dragons. And the dragons, of course, we're assuming are meant to be Ryan and Taylor.
You see, that's just such classic bully behavior, using your social network to wield power and then also using that sort of threat of exclusion to get what you want. And once that stuck, though, it was almost impossible for people to see her as a sympathetic victim. So on Reddit, someone said, look, I have a fantasy type imagination too, but you couldn't waterboard these thoughts out of me, much less get them in print. It looks so cringe, I feel secondhand embarrassment. And another person said, well, you have to wonder how many times she's used her dragons that we haven't heard of. It's not a good look.
So after Justin filed his case and released all his evidence, it seemed people weren't really buying Blake as a victim. In fact, victimhood itself was being weaponized against her.
I find it really funny because normally we're primed to take the victim's side. So researchers at Indiana University found that 1, victim characters receive greater attention and are often remembered better. And 2, victim characters receive more empathy. But I think the issue that we really have here in this Blake v. Justin situation is both sides are actually claiming to be the victim, but in very different ways. And with the fame, the wealth, and the connections firmly on Blake's side, she really isn't the underdog at all.
No, and you saw a lot of these kind of comments. It's hard to feel sorry for a multimillionaire married to Ryan Reynolds.
I also think there's something else going on too here, and it seems like there's almost a visible empathy fatigue after the Me Too movement. So we saw the first cracks during the Amber Heard trial, but in this case, it really had gone sort of full force, I would say. And that's where commentators like Candace Owens stepped in, and they stepped in hard. So she's long argued that Me Too went too far, and she's made videos like The Revenge of Me Too, where she framed Blake as basically just another example of weaponizing Me Too, you know, turning personal disputes into performative victimhood. So she says this.
How is this allowed? Literally, I'm just asking the question, like, how are women allowed to do this, to take something and to make it sound like you survived a rape? Because that's what it sounded like to the public when she spoke about everything that he possibly did, when she first dropped that or had someone on her team leak to the New York Times, that initial complaint filed in California, you just go, how is this allowed? This is why I say being a little bit cheeky, but also not. Like, I just hate the modern women today. You know, this feminist, like, you're suffering from absolutely nothing. This is what it means to be, by the way, an actor.
And she really casts Blake as the poster child for what she calls elite feminism gone wrong, or even feminism as a vanity project.
And that message has really landed. You know, there's a big community out there that feels you can't just threaten or cancel someone by making sexual allegations, and they're angry about it.
I do think that we have had hundreds of years where women were dismissed or not believed, or worst case scenario, even stoned for adultery after they'd been raped. And I know that both of us, we both have a lot of sympathy for women. For myself, my impulse is definitely to feel that most of the rape accusations are true. And I know for a fact that there are so many more out there that don't even get reported because they're afraid of being shamed and being called a liar. But at the same time, it is true that there are some individuals who will make false claims for their own motivations. There's been evidence of this. But I personally do believe that that's a very small minority. That said, it's just as damaging to men and their families who are on the receiving end of a malicious, fabricated complaint. And I don't think that's something that should be encouraged or even tolerated.
I do think that's why you're seeing so much fury in the comments. Like, she's weaponized Me Too. Every time she didn't get her way, she pulled the victim card. And another, this is Amber Heard 2.0, only richer and smugger.
Well, it feels like it makes it so much harder for people who are genuinely assaulted. And here's the thing, once sympathy collapses, the algorithm, it just descends into she's lying, and it completely rewards mockery.
Which does make me wonder, have we just hit empathy fatigue? Like, after years of this Me Too, are people burnt out on hearing victim stories?
I think there's something behind that, because when we're constantly exposed to other people's suffering, we eventually become desensitized, and we start to lose the ability to feel empathy anymore. Basically, we just get burnt out from caring. And this used to be definitely seen more in the caring industries and people in the front line. So I'm thinking nurses, police, firemen, etc. But we've now got the rise of the 24-hour news cycle, social media, and, you know, like you mentioned, the Me Too era, where we've just heard so many victim stories. And I think we've actually reached a point where it's like, why should we care? You know?
And I do think that this hits even harder for celebrities.
Yeah, and they really do seem to have these perfect lives, let's say. And when you think of the current economic and political landscape, the last few years have been tough for everyone. We've had the pandemic, and there have just been some really terrible international conflicts, not to mention the cost of living crises. And everyday people's lives are really hard right now. So I think Sara Pascoe summed it up when she said,
it's hard to feel sorry for rich people, isn't it? Because okay, we'll go and be sad in the Bahamas then.
Yeah, that's brilliant. But I do think a big part of this case is the idea of eat the rich. But you do see a lot more resentment about her leaning in on victimhood.
Well, I think it's a natural pendulum effect, which is the theory that holds that trends in culture and politics, etc., they do tend to swing back and forth between opposite extremes. So for centuries, women weren't believed. Then Me Too shifted us to believe all women. And now the pendulum has swung back again into cynicism. We overcorrect before we find the balance.
I do think that the backlash against Blake is definitely part of that overcorrection. And I've seen these comments about Blake. People saying she's self-sabotaged. One YouTube thread put it bluntly, regardless of how this case goes, she's ruined her reputation in the public eye.
We've really also seen a massive contagion effect. So Taylor Swift was quietly stepping back. Anna Kendrick was dragged in by association. And it now seems that people just don't want anything to do with it at all.
Which is why I think now Blake is seen as now what reputation analysts call a toxic asset. Even in Variety's announcement of her new rom-com, The Survival List, it's been really drowned out by comments like, every woman I know can't stand her, or I won't pay to watch her in anything. And one analyst even said her subpoena blitz makes her look like a toxic diva that's punching down on online creators.
Well, it does look like there's a very high demand for any content or stories that act as, well, what they call proof that Blake is a terrible person, no matter how long ago they come from. But it doesn't seem like anyone's speaking up for her.
I do see a few people sticking up for her, but nowhere near as many as for Justin. I do think if you leave a positive comment or come across as too supportive, people quickly accuse you of being on her payroll.
And that's a really clever part, because comment suspicion has become a tactic in itself. If you can convince the internet that every positive post is fake, you've basically erased all of someone's visible support.
Very Trump, this is fake news.
Yeah, absolutely. So where does this leave us now? Can we even trust the comments?
First, let me start with this comment. These I stand with Blake comments all read like PR scripts. No normal person talks like that. Have you heard of astroturfing?
I've vaguely heard of the term just being thrown around, but I actually don't know what it means.
Neither had I. I mean, I listened to this amazing podcast last year. I kept going on about it, but it's called Who's Trolled Amber Heard? Now, you know I watched all the Amber and Johnny trial. I kind of went missing for a month.
Yeah, I remember.
Not embarrassed to say I was obsessed with it. And actually, I was more on his side. But this podcast made me change my mind about a few things.
Well, I do know that you've mentioned it to me a few times, and I do intend to listen to it. It is on my list, my long, long list.
Yeah, I know. I keep adding things for it. But look, here's the main highlights for you. What they found is a massive part of the outrage against Amber wasn't organic. And one analysis found that at least half the conversations around her were inauthentic. And actually, this was confirmed in later studies, that much of Depp's support was what they call inorganic, as in it was spread by suspicious or newly created profiles. And investigations even uncovered troll farms amplifying the anti-Amber frenzy. There's a word for this kind of sort of fake grassroots outrage. It's called astroturfing. So you've got like this plastic grass, astroturfing, opposed to real grass.
Okay, that makes sense to me now.
Yeah. And the whole point is to make it look like spontaneous public anger.
But so this is actually the same team that Justin's using himself, right?
Yes, he's brought in the same crisis PR veteran, Melissa Nathan, who represented Johnny Depp during the Amber Heard trial.
Do we actually have any signs that she's using the same tactics again here?
Well, actually, Zohan Shen, a data analyst who tracked the Johnny Depp bot networks, looked at the Baldoni lively reactions. He's estimated that over 80% of the pro-Justin posts were inorganic.
Oh, okay, wow. So she's really earning her fee then.
Massively. I mean, think about that. If he's right, most of the online support for Justin, or the pile-on against Blake, comes from fake or highly suspect accounts.
Wow. Are people actually spotting this, though?
Oh, absolutely. On Reddit, one user wrote, "The activity in these threads is clearly astroturfing. You can see how fast dissenting views get downvoted. That's not natural behaviour. This feels like Depp and Heard all over again."
You know, it's really unsettling to think we can't trust what actually looks like a consensus online.
Absolutely. When you think about it, you know, that huge pylon that you see might not be popular opinion at all. It could just be an absolute sort of mirage created by a PR firm or maybe a group of PR interns.
You know what actually scares me more than that is just how the creators lean into it. They know anti-Blake content performs better, and the harsher the take, usually the more clicks. As you said earlier in the rage economy, the harsher the take, the more their accounts skyrocket. And that's just from views and ad revenue. There's even been accusations thrown around that they're being paid by the PR firms to generate support or negative content. And this is something Blake's team are trying to prove with her subpoena blitz.
You're so right. For example, Perez Hilton. By the way, I never thought I'd hear about him again.
No.
You know, he feels very 2006, but he seems to have re-emerged on the scene. He's been named in Blake's complaint as part of the smear campaign, and her lawyers say he's published over 500 negative posts about her across platforms.
Wow.
On YouTube, he repeatedly slams her, and the comment sections are always cheering him on. Blake Lively is getting what she deserves, or she's messed with the wrong guy. But look, if you try defending Blake in these spaces, you're either ignored or instantly downvoted. And it just really does create this echo chamber effect where only the sort of anti-Blake voices thrive. And when I was doing research for this episode, you know, one of the things I found striking is that if you are pro-Blake, I think you're kind of retreating elsewhere. Like there's this private Facebook group where I looked and the posts were overwhelmingly supportive, mostly women, you know, proud of Blake for fighting back against workplace harassment, those kind of comments.
Well, it does seem to be just this sort of classic peer pressure, but just the new digital style. And no one really wants to put their head above the parapet and risk being doxxed because that seems to be the go-to these days.
Yeah. Look, it doesn't matter what you think of Blake. I think she said on the record that she can't believe that the tidal wave of hate against her has been organic. And one comment really summed it up. I have never liked Blake Lively, and even I thought, what the fuck is this level of vitriol? Even if she's tone deaf, the hate was disproportionate. I wanted to say something, but anyone defending her got instantly downvoted and piled on, so I stayed silent, which sucks because that's exactly what they're counting on. Or as another person put it, I don't even like Blake, but no normal person hates this hard.
But on the other hand, there are also a lot of people out there who are insisting it's real. There was one user who joked, "You're getting paid? I dragged the plantation princess for free." And someone else replied, "Is there a way to get paid? Because I'd happily trash her for how she and her insecure husband stole Justin's film. Times are tough."
Oh gosh. Are you running a content farm, Sarah? Just be honest.
God, well, if I was, I wish I was making a lot more money, so.
Yeah. I mean, it is really, like we said, it's such a minefield to figure out what is real or not.
Yeah, and this is where I actually want to look at the bigger sociological picture, because we're increasingly living in what people have described a post-truth world. On the one hand, there's this increasing number of communication and media technologies, and it's just not possible to police and fact check at the speed that that content is coming out. And what that means is that a lot of people are being led to make decisions based on emotion rather than factual evidence. Or another strategy that people use is they choose a personality to trust, and then they accept everything they say. So we effectively now outsource our opinions. For example, with Candace Owens or Rachel Maddow.
And alongside that, suspicion is just rising and rising. Not just suspicion of mainstream media, but of influencers and everyday commentators. One recent US study found that 64% of people lose trust in influencers if they don't clearly disclose paid partnerships. In fact, traditional advertising is now seen as more trustworthy than influencer endorsements.
Wow, we've gone full circle.
Yeah.
You know, I really think that's because it feels like there's been this kind of breach of the psychological contract between us. And when I say us, I mean the consumers and the influencer or celebrity. And this contract is really an unwritten set of expectations and obligations between the two parties. So there was this study in Hong Kong, and they found that when influencers use undisclosed sponsorships or misleading endorsements, viewers often feel a sense of betrayal, disappointment, or even mistrust.
You know when people say, oh, I'm absolutely obsessed with this product? I feel like I see this kind of content all the time.
I just roll my eyes.
And I saw a comment, yeah, I'm obsessed. Someone summed it up well in this comment. As I mindlessly scroll through the online reviews, my head aches as I do not know what to believe. And once you see a few instances of proven astroturfing, it's hard not to suspect that most trends are fake.
I think it's part of this sort of ongoing loss of innocence, shall we say. There was definitely a time when most people believed that if you read something in print, then it had to be true. Then we started learning about PR and spin, and I think various scandals like WikiLeaks have got people to a point where they think, I can't necessarily believe what the government, what a business, or what a celebrity spokesperson is actually telling me. Even then, we still believed that a picture was worth 1,000 words. So if the media had evidence, if they had a photo, a video, or if they had an audio recording, we could still believe our eyes and ears. But now in the last couple of decades, we know about Photoshop, and now with AI, content is so believable, it can be almost impossible to tell the difference. So we're living in this world where, I cannot trust my senses. I don't know what I'm seeing. So what does that actually leave us with in the end? And often what it is just the things that already confirm our biases or beliefs, or more so, even what we hope to be true.
I really do think that explains the surge of conspiracy theories. You know, once it just seemed like the odd person, but now it feels like half the internet.
It's interesting you say that because it seems that way to me too. But when I actually looked into studies about it, so far they haven't been able to find any evidence that beliefs in conspiracy theories are increasing over time. And there are always limitations to all of these studies. It's really hard to tell whether it just feels like they're increasing because they're being given more mainstream exposure these days compared to before, or whether actually, now that we've got the internet, the people who might have always thought that way didn't want to share it before because they were afraid of being laughed at. And now they're finding other people online and they're encouraging each other to be more open with it. It's hard to know.
But when it comes to this case, Justin and Blake, it really does feel like we're seeing the curtain ripped back.
Yeah, very much like the Wizard of Oz. We're now seeing all the machinery behind it all. And you know what? It's just a little disappointing. And I think that's maybe why the real story here isn't Blake versus Justin. It's us versus the machine. And the question isn't just who's lying, who's telling the truth. It's whether we can even tell if we're hearing from real people at all.
Which is the part I find really crazy, because it could just be bots and AI arguing with itself.
I mean, yeah, so it's a funny image. Like, but even if they're just arguing with themselves, the effect of these arguments do end up rippling into the real world. So it is worrying.
You know, in the real world, most women who speak up or file a complaint won't be fighting bots or smear campaigns, but what they can face can be just as damaging. You get quietly frozen out of promotions, branded as difficult, or pushed into signing NDAs, all while becoming the centre of office gossip. The power dynamics are the same, they're just less visible.
Well, you know, they might not be in TikToks in the same way, but everyday people are using the same tools. So, for example, AI-driven deepfake pornography for revenge against their exes. So it is something that I think we should be vigilant about.
I mean, it is really scary. These tactics are moving faster than anyone can keep up with. And I do think it's important, like what we're doing today, is to pull the curtain back, expose these tactics. And it feels like talking about it really is the only defence that we've got right now. We've come to the end of today's episode, and just want to remind you that the Blake versus Justin legal case does continue. Blake's original harassment complaint is heading to trial for March 2026. And here's the thing, it isn't going to be a televised trial. It's a New York state court. So no cameras, so the public won't see Blake or Justin testify. Instead, everything we'll get will be secondhand. It will be leaks, legal filings, Reddit threads, TikToks, mail online, which means the comments section almost becomes the courtroom. Or as one Redditor sums it up, forget the jury, TikTok decides this one.
And that's really risky because the stakes couldn't be higher. So for Blake, it's her credibility and her whole brand is on the line. And for Justin, this trial is kind of survival. If he loses, it could seriously impact his career, even with the public support that he seems to have.
And this is where we're going to go next, because as we said, this isn't just a lawsuit, it's entertainment. In episode 2, we'll ask whether justice, whatever that might mean, can survive when the courtroom itself is turned into theatre. So we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And if you like today's show, please share, hopefully give us a 5-star rating. And join us over on Instagram. I think we're going to have some conversations around this topic at Straight to the Comments. You'll find us there.